Hey, my name's Dylan. I'm 26, and I live alone in a small apartment above an old laundromat on the edge of Portland, Oregon. It's not much a creaky floor couch I got for free off Craigslist and a coffee maker that's seen better days. By day, I fix laptops, phones, and circuit boards at a tech repair shop downtown. It's not glamorous, but it pays the rent. At night, I jog through the misty streets, earbuds and lo-fi beats, drowning out the hum of the city. My life's quiet, repetitive, maybe a little empty. No family nearby, no real roots. Just me, my toolbox, and a playlist that loops like my days. I've never been great at dating. 3 bad dates in a row will do that to you. There was the one who talked about her ex the whole time, the one who ghosted me mid-text, and the one who showed up drunk and tried to sell me crypto. So when I matched with Nina, 23, a communications major with a sharp smile on her profile, I figured I'd give it one last shot. We texted for a week, decent banter, nothing life-changing, but enough to make me think it could work. We agreed to meet at a small restaurant downtown, a place I'd been to a couple of times. Red brick walls, soft candlelight jazz humming in the background. It felt like the kind of spot where something good could start. I got there 10 minutes early, old habit. The place was half full, couples murmuring over wine glasses, a waiter weaving through tables. A woman approached, her brown hair tied back in a neat bun apron, crisp and white. She had a calm way about her, like she could handle a rush without breaking a sweat. Her name tag read, Sophie. Evening, she said, her voice warm but professional. Table for 1. 2, I said, shifting in my sneakers. I'm waiting for someone. I gave her a quick smile and she nodded, leading me to a small table by the window. The glass was streaked with rain, Portland's usual evening drizzle. I sat down fiddling with the menu, trying not to check my phone every 10 seconds. Nina showed up 7 minutes late. She walked in, phone in hand, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She looked like her pictures, blonde, sharp cheekbones, a black dress that probably cost more than my rent. But her smile was tight, like it was on a timer. Hey, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. No apology for being late, no real warmth. She set her phone face up on the table, the screen glowing with notifications. I tried to start things off easy. How's your day been? I asked, leaning forward a bit. Her eyes flicked to her phone, then back to me. Fine, she said, her fingers already tapping the screen. The fake nails made sharp little clicks like a metronome, keeping time to her disinterest. I pushed on, talking about my job, how I'd spent the morning untangling a laptop's fried motherboard. Sounds like you just fix broken phones, she said, not looking up. No curiosity, no follow-up, just a flat statement. I nodded, forcing a grin. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I tried again, telling a story about fixing a phone for my aunt a few years back, right after her husband passed. It was a beat-up old thing, full of photos she didn't want to lose. I spent hours recovering them, and when I handed it back, she hugged me like I'd brought him back to life. It's one of those memories that sticks with you. Nina barely glanced up. That's cool, she said, her thumb scrolling. There's this guy on TikTok who does that kind of stuff. You seen him? I blinked, caught off guard. No, I don't really do TikTok. She shrugged, her eyes locked on her screen. You should. He's got like 1 million followers. I felt like I was talking to a wall. The jazz in the background seemed louder than our conversation. I sipped my water, glancing around the room. Sophie was at another table, refilling a couple's wine glasses, her movements smooth and deliberate. She caught my eye for a split second, and I swear there was a flicker of something, sympathy maybe, or understanding. Like she could see how this was going. Nina ordered her food without looking at the menu. Salmon, but no herbs, okay? Like none at all. She said to Sophie, her tone sharp, like she was talking to an app instead of a person. Sophie nodded, jotting it down her face. Neutral, but her eyes sharp, taking it all in. I ordered a burger, kept it simple. When Sophie walked away, I tried one more time to connect. So, you're studying communications, right? What's that like? Nina sighed like the question was a chore. It's fine. A lot of group projects. Kinda boring. Her phone lit up again, and she was gone, lost in whatever was on that screen. By the time the food arrived, I'd given up. We ate mostly in silence, broken only by the clink of her nails on her phone. Sophie came by to check on us, her voice soft. Everything okay here, she asked, looking at me a beat longer than necessary. I nodded, managing a weak smile. Yeah, all good. Nina didn't even look up. Nina. When Nina finished, she stood abruptly. I gotta run, she said, grabbing her purse. Thanks for dinner. No offer to split the bill, no real goodbye. She was out the door before I could say anything. I sat there staring at the half-eaten burger, feeling like I'd just wasted 2 hours of my life. The restaurant felt emptier now, the jazz a little sadder. Sophie came over to clear the table, stacking plates with quiet efficiency. She set the bill down a small black folder with a receipt tucked inside. Then she paused, her hand lingering on the table. If it was me, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, I'd have stayed. I looked up, caught off guard. Her eyes were steady, not flirty, just honest, like she meant every word. Before I could respond, she turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving me with the echo of her voice. I paid the bill, my mind replaying her words. They weren't romantic, not exactly, but they hit something deep, something I hadn't realized I was missing. When I got home, I checked my email. A confirmation for the meal popped up from the restaurant system. At the bottom in neat handwriting was a note. If you need someone who listens, I'm on the evening shift. S. I sat on my couch, the lo-fi playlist still humming through my speakers, and read that note again. For the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. The next evening, I found myself back at the restaurant. I hadn't planned it, not really. My shift at the repair shop ended at 6, and instead of heading home to my usual routine jogging lo-fi and a frozen pizza, I grabbed my jacket and drove downtown. The rain was heavier now, Portland's drizzle turning into a steady patter against my windshield. The red brick building looked warm from the outside, its windows glowing through the mist. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked in. Sophie was there behind the counter, wiping down a coffee machine. She glanced up as the bell above the door jingled, and her face softened into a small smile. Back already, she said, her voice carrying that same calm warmth from the night before. She was in her mid-30s, I guessed, though it was hard to pin down. Her brown hair was tied back again, a few loose strands framing her face, and her apron had a small coffee stain near the hem. She looked tired but steady, like someone who'd learned to carry the weight of a long day without complaint. Yeah, I said, sliding into the same table by the window. Guess I'm becoming a regular. She chuckled, a sound that felt like it could cut through the rain outside. Coffee then, black, no sugar. I nodded, surprised she remembered. You're good, I said, and she just shrugged, like it was no big deal before heading to the machine. The place was quieter tonight, just a few tables occupied. An older couple shared a dessert in the corner, and a guy in a hoodie typed furiously on his laptop. The jazz was softer, almost drowned out by the rain tapping the glass. Sophie brought my coffee over, setting it down with a napkin tucked underneath. I noticed a tiny doodle on it, a cartoon screwdriver scribbled in blue ink. I looked up at her, raising an eyebrow. What's this? She smirked, leaning against the table for a second. You said you fix things. Figured you'd appreciate it. Her eyes had a playful glint, but there was something else there too. Something that said she'd been paying attention last night, not just to my order, but to me. We got to talking nothing heavy at first. I asked about the restaurant, and she told me about the chaos of the dinner rush, picky customers, a guy who sent back his steak 3 times because it wasn't medium rare enough. I laughed, telling her about a client at the shop who swore his laptop broke because of bad Wi-Fi vibes. She grinned, shaking her head. People are weird, she said, and I nodded, feeling the knot in my chest loosen a bit. The conversation drifted. She mentioned she'd moved to Portland a couple of years ago after a messy divorce in Seattle. I used to be a barista there, she said, wiping down a nearby table as she talked. Thought I'd try something new here, but serving's all the same. You just smile through the nonsense. There was a weight to her words, but she didn't linger on it. Instead, she asked about me. So, what's your deal? You always fix stuff, or is there more to Dylan? I hesitated, then told her about my dad. He was a mechanic, not cars, but old radios and stereos. He'd left me a toolbox when he passed full of stuff like a rusted screwdriver I still used. It's dumb, probably, I said, staring into my coffee. But every time I hold it, it's like he's still showing me how to twist it right. Sophie didn't laugh or brush it off. She just nodded, her eyes steady. That's not dumb, she said. It's real. That night set a pattern. I started showing up every evening after work, not always with a plan, just drawn to the place. Sometimes I ordered food, a burger, a salad, but after a while it was just coffee. Black, no sugar, always with a napkin doodle from Sophie. A phone with a cracked screen one night, a tiny smiley face another. She remembered I stopped drinking caffeine after 9, switching me to decaf without me asking. It wasn't flashy, but it felt like she saw me, not just the guy at the table. One night, it was pouring outside, the kind of rain that makes Portland feel like it's underwater. The restaurant was dead, just me and a flickering candle. Sophie was closing up stacking chairs when I offered to help. "You don't have to," she said, but I grabbed a broom anyway. We worked in silence for a bit, the only sounds the rain and the faint hum of jazz. When we finished, she poured us the last of the coffee pot and we sat at the counter, mugs steaming between us. "You ever think about doing something else?" I asked, watching her trace the rim of her mug. She sighed, leaning back. "Yeah, I've got this dream of opening my own coffee shop. Nothing big, just a place with good music, good beans, and no one yelling about parsley." She smiled, but it faded fast. "But I've got a kid, 8 years old, loves drawing. He's with my mom most days. Starting a business feels like a risk I can't take." I nodded, thinking about my own half-formed dreams, a repair shop of my own, maybe something small but mine. "I get that," I said. "I've got ideas, but they're stuck in my head. Like I'd love a place where I could fix stuff and not deal with corporate nonsense." She looked at me, her eyes soft but curious. "You'd be good at it. You've got that steady thing going on." We kept talking, the rain, a steady drum outside. She told me about her son, how he drew superheroes on every scrap of paper he could find. I told her about the time I fixed an old Game Boy for a kid at the shop, how his face lit up when it powered on. It wasn't a big moment, no violins or grand gestures, just two people sharing pieces of themselves. But it felt like something solid, something I hadn't had in a long time. A few nights later, I showed up just before closing. Sophie was wiping down tables, her apron untied and slung over her shoulder. She saw me and grinned. "You're gonna wear out that chair," she said, nodding at my usual spot. I laughed, sitting down anyway. "It's comfortable." She brought over 2 coffees this time, setting one in front of me and keeping the other for herself. The napkin under mine had a new doodle, a tiny pair of running shoes like the ones I wore on my jogs. "Nice touch," I said, holding it up. She shrugged, but her smile was warm. Had to keep it interesting. We talked longer that night about nothing and everything, her ex who'd left her for someone less complicated, my string of bad dates, the way Portland's rain made everything feel like a fresh start. At one point she leaned forward, her voice quiet. "Why do you keep coming back, Dylan? The coffee's not that good." I looked at her, the candlelight catching the edge of her face. My heart thudded, but I kept it honest. "Because this place, it's where I can breathe, where I feel like me." She didn't say anything, just held my gaze for a long moment. The next night when I walked in, there were 2 cups waiting on the table, steam curling up like an invitation. The weeks blurred into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. Every evening I'd leave the repair shop, the smell of solder and dust still clinging to my hands, and head to the restaurant. It wasn't just about Sophie anymore, though she was the heart of it. It was the way the place felt like a pause in the world. Red brick walls, soft jazz, the steady patter of Portland's rain against the windows. I'd sit at my usual table. Sophie would bring a coffee with a doodle on the napkin, a circuit board one night, a tiny rain cloud another, and we'd talk until closing. Sometimes it was light, like her stories of customers who tipped in loose change, or my rants about clients who spilled water on laptops that smelled like Red Bull. Other times it went deeper, her fears about raising her son Max alone, or my quiet ache from years of keeping everyone at arm's length. One night we'd gone running together in the park, our sneakers splashing through puddles under the streetlights. She laughed when I tripped over a root, and I teased her about her playlist, too much indie folk for a city girl. Afterward, we sat on a bench, catching our breath, sharing a thermos of coffee she'd brought. "You're not bad company, Dylan," she said, nudging my shoulder. I grinned, my chest warm despite the chill. "You're not so bad yourself." It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real. Something that made the world feel less heavy. Then on a Thursday evening, everything shifted. The restaurant was busier than usual, a low hum of conversation filling the air. I was at my table sipping coffee, doodling on a napkin to match Sophie's a clumsy sketch of a coffee mug. She was across the room balancing a tray of plates when the door swung open. I didn't look up at first, too focused on getting the mug's handle right. But then I heard her voice. "Dylan." It was Nina. She stood by my table, her blonde hair pulled back, a sleek coat draped over her arm. She looked different, sharper, like she'd stepped out of a magazine shoot. Didn't expect to see you here, she said, her smile tight but polished like she'd rehearsed it. I set the napkin down my stomach, twisting. Yeah, I come here a lot, I said, keeping my tone neutral. What's up? She slid into the chair across from me without asking, her purse hitting the table with a soft thud. I was just in the area, she said, though. Her eyes darted around like she was looking for something. Thought I'd say hi. I nodded, unsure what to say. Our date months ago had been a disaster, her glued to her phone, me feeling like a prop in her evening. I hadn't thought about her since, not really. But here she was, her nails still clicking against her phone as she spoke. Look, she said, leaning forward. I owe you an apology for last time. I was distracted. Things were messy with a guy I was seeing. But I'm in a better place now. She paused, her smile softening. Maybe we could try again. Give it a real shot. The words hung there heavy and unexpected. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind flashed to that first night, the way Nina barely looked at me, the way Sophie's quiet I'd have stayed had lingered like a lifeline. Before I could respond, Sophie appeared, setting 2 coffees down on the table. Her apron was slightly askew, her face calm, but her eyes sharp, catching every detail. Evening, she said, her voice steady, professional. Anything else I can get you? Nina glanced at her, then at me, her brow furrowing slightly. You two know each other. She asked, her tone curious but edged. Sophie didn't flinch, just gave a small smile. I'm the evening shift, she said simply, then turned to check another table. I watched her go, my chest tight. Nina leaned closer, her voice dropping. So what do you say, dinner maybe? Somewhere nicer than this? I looked at her then, at the coffee cups, the napkin with my half-finished doodle. I thought about the nights with Sophie, her quiet laughter, the way she remembered decaf after 9, the thermos we shared in the park. I thought about Max, her son, who'd started showing me his superhero drawings when I picked her up from her mom's place last week. I thought about the rusted screwdriver in my toolbox, the one my dad left me, and how Sophie had listened when I told her about it, really listened. Thanks, Nina, I said, my voice steady now. But I'm good. I'm exactly where I need to be. Her smile faltered just for a second before she shrugged. Your loss, she said, standing up. See you around, Dylan. She walked out, her heels clicking, the door swinging shut behind her. The jazz seemed to swell for a moment, filling the space she left. Sophie came back a few minutes later, clearing Nina's untouched coffee. Everything okay? She asked, her tone careful, like she was testing the air. I looked up at her, the candlelight catching the edges of her hair. Yeah, I said. More than okay. She nodded, a flicker of relief in her eyes, and went back to work. Later, after closing, we sat at the counter, the restaurant empty except for us. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, streaking the windows. Sophie untied her apron, folding it neatly on the counter. She seemed nice, she said, her voice light, but her eyes searching mine. I shook my head. She wasn't you. She didn't respond right away, just sipped her coffee, her fingers tracing the handle of the mug. Then she spoke, her voice quieter now. Dylan, I'm not simple. I've got Max, a kid who needs me. I'm older than you, and I've got baggage, divorce, trust issues, all of it. You sure you want to be here? I leaned forward, holding her gaze. Sophie, I spent years fixing things. Phones, laptops, broken screens. But you're the first thing that's fixed me. I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes softened, and for the first time she reached across the counter, her hand brushing mine. It wasn't a big moment, no fireworks, just a quiet promise. The next day, I stopped by her mom's place to pick her up for our usual run. Max was there, a lanky 8-year-old with a sketchbook under his arm. Hey, Dylan, he said, holding up a drawing of a superhero with a screwdriver for a weapon. This one's you. I laughed, ruffling his hair, and caught Sophie's smile from the doorway. It felt like the start of something bigger, something real. A year later, my life didn't look like it used to. The apartment above the laundromat was a memory now replaced by a cozy space on the second floor of a small coffee shop just outside Portland's bustle. The shop was called Sophie's, its name, painted in bold looping letters on a sign above the red brick storefront. Inside, the air smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries, with jazz humming softly through speakers tucked in the corners. I had a corner of my own, a small workbench by the front window where I fixed phones and laptops between sips of black coffee. The glass was streaked with rain most days, but the view of the quiet street felt like home. Sophie and I had built this place together. It started as her dream, something she'd mentioned that rainy night when we closed the restaurant. I'd offered to help at first, just with small things, rewiring the old electrical system, fixing the creaky door. But it grew into more. I sold my old tools to buy a used espresso machine, and Sophie spent her savings on tables and chairs from a thrift shop. We painted the walls ourselves late into the night, laughing when we got more paint on each other than the plaster. Max, her 8-year-old son, helped too, his small hands leaving smudges we decided to keep his character. We lived upstairs in what used to be a storage room. It wasn't big, just a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area with a couch we'd found at a garage sale. But it was ours, filled with the smell of coffee from below and the sound of Max's pencil scratching on paper as he drew his superheroes. Mornings started with Sophie brewing a pot of coffee, black, no sugar, just how I liked it. Evenings we'd sit at the counter after closing her, sketching ideas for the menu. While I tinkered with a broken phone, Max sprawled on the floor with his sketchbook. It wasn't perfect, but it was full, the kind of full that settles into your bones. Life wasn't always smooth. Sophie had rough days when the weight of being a single mom before me lingered. She'd get quiet, staring out the window, her mind somewhere else. I learned not to push, just to sit beside her with a coffee until she came back. Max had his moments too. Questions about his dad, worries about fitting in at school. I'd take him to the park, toss a ball around, or let him help at my workbench, showing him how to use a screwdriver without stripping the screws. He started calling me Dylan, not Mr. Dylan like he used to, and once when Sophie wasn't looking, he slipped a drawing under my coffee mug, a superhero with a wrench and a coffee cup labeled Dylan the Fixer. One Saturday morning, we were out back setting up a small patio for the shop. Sophie wanted a place for customers to sit in the rare Portland sunshine. Max was painting a sign for the door, his tongue sticking out as he focused. I was hauling chairs when Sophie came out, 2 mugs in her hands. She handed me one, her fingers brushing mine, and sat on the edge of a table. "You ever think about that first night?" she asked, her voice soft, her eyes on the horizon. "All the time," I said, leaning against a chair. "You and that napkin doodle changed everything." She smiled, a little sad, a little warm. "I was so scared to write that note. Thought you'd think I was some weird older woman hitting on you." I laughed, shaking my head. "I thought you were the only person who saw me." She looked at me, then her brown hair loose for once, catching the light. "You saw me too, Dylan. Not the waitress, not the mom, just me." I set my mug down and stepped closer, taking her hand. It was calloused from years of carrying trays, but it fit mine perfectly. "Still do," I said. That afternoon, we took Max to the park where we'd gone running that first time. He darted ahead, chasing a stray soccer ball, while Sophie and I walked behind, her arm looped through mine. The rain had stopped for once, leaving the air crisp and clean. "You know," she said, "I used to think I'd never have this. A place of life, someone who stays." I squeezed her hand. "You've got it now. We both do." Back at the shop, there was a photo on the wall by the door, one we'd taken on a whim during a rainy evening. 2 coffee cups sat side by side on the counter, steam curling up the window behind them, streaked with rain. Below it, in Sophie's neat handwriting, was a line: "Some things start when someone decides to stay." Every time I passed it, I remembered that first night, her quiet words, the napkin note, the way she made me feel like I wasn't just passing through. We weren't married, not yet. There was no ring, no big proposal. But we had mornings with coffee, evenings with Max's laughter, and a life we'd built from scratch. I thought about Nina sometimes, that fleeting moment when she'd come back, offering a second chance I didn't want. I didn't need it. I was right where I belonged. As I locked up the shop that night, Sophie was upstairs reading to Max. I paused at the counter, tracing the edge of that photo. The world outside was dark, the rain starting again, but inside it was warm, full of light and the soft hum of jazz. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a home, not just a place to sleep, but a home with people who saw me, who stayed. And that was enough. What did this story stir in you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. If it moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and join us for more stories that remind us what it means to stay.